So let's talk about estate planning. As I mentioned earlier, when a person passes away, we no longer talk about advanced care. If you have done proper financial planning, you will still have something left behind to be given to your loved one, right? Through a will. Now, if you don't have a will, right, your assets will be distributed by the law. In Singapore, we have this law called the Intestate Succession Act, right? The law contains a formula. The formula basically makes certain assumptions that your immediate next of kin will get your estate in certain proportions. Now, for a moment, think about this. You let the law decide for you. You let the law decide for you who should get your hard-earned money. You might as well let Daniel or let Patrick decide for you. It doesn't make any sense. You let other people decide for you, it doesn't make any sense. You decide yourself. Because we're talking about your own loved ones, We're talking about your money. You're not talking about government's money. You let the government tell you who to give to, in what proportions to give your money. It doesn't make any sense. You decide yourself. And the only way to do so is through a will. You spend your lifetime working so hard, accumulating assets, buy insurance, buy car, buy HDB. Then you don't have a will to tell people how you want to give your assets to. Doesn't make sense. So it doesn't make any sense if you don't have a will. And it is not expensive. So I have listed some of the reasons in the past why people in the past did not want to make a will. Right? When I first started practice 20 years ago, it was a taboo subject. They think that making wills for the rich and famous. Another mistake, they think the loved ones know what to do, or nothing will happen as if they will live forever. So they kept procrastinating. So all these were no reasons to hold them back. But thankfully nowadays, people are more enlightened. Many people are coming forward to have their wills done. And also because now the cost of doing a will is actually very affordable. So a lot of people are actually coming forward to do their wills every year. And not only that, every few years they will actually review their estate planning, review their will. So it is becoming common affair for many people to actually do will. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, making a will, just like advanced care planning, is never just about you. It is about your loved ones. Especially for a will. When your will comes into effect, you're dead anyway. It's not about you, it's about your loved ones. Right? When you're alive, your will has no effect. Unlike an LPA. LPA comes into effect when you're still alive, when you have lost mental capacity. A will not come into effect when you're alive. That means that when you're alive, you can change your will. Right? And also, message number 2, having proper and adequate financial planning is as important as making a will. I have made my point earlier. Having a will is not sufficient. You need to ensure you have done proper financial planning. So as we all know, will is a written legal document, black and white. It cannot be verbalized, right? Don't believe what you watch on TV. Before you die, you mumble certain instructions. Those are invalid. Whatever you want to say or want to give or who you want to give it to has to be reduced in writing in this document called a will. All right? It has to be in black and white. And why is a will so important? Because you love and care for your family. You have provided for your children education, right? A roof over their head, food. It makes sense for you to also make a will because making a will is an act of responsibility. It's an act of love and care for your loved ones because you are essentially making provisions for them when you die. I mean, when you're alive, you can plan, okay, every month I give you $200, I provide for your school. But what about when you die, after you die? You need to provide for them, make plans, all those things that you have accumulated, that you work so hard for. You need to plan and tell them, now daddy is no longer around. Daddy is no longer alive. These are the things that I have worked so hard for. And these are the things that I have left behind for you. Right? It is a sign of responsibility, care, and love. All right? And because you get to decide, like I mentioned earlier, who gets your hard-earned money after you pass away. Don't let the law decide. It doesn't make any sense. Because the law doesn't know who is filial to you. The law doesn't know who do you love more. The law doesn't know which among your children needs your help. Right? The law basically makes certain assumptions. Right? That you would want to give your spouse 50% and your children 50%. It may not work for you. And because you can appoint this person called an executor, something like a donee, somebody you trust, who will be in charge of distributing, administering your estate after you pass away. So executor is very important. You get to appoint this person in your will. And who can you appoint exactly? Executor can be your beneficiary as well. So if you're considering giving your asset to your son, you can consider appointing your son as the executor. Because an executor can also be a beneficiary. Let me repeat, an executor of a will can also be a beneficiary. But a beneficiary cannot be a witness. Now, in order for your will to be valid, you need at least 2 independent witnesses. All right? So executor can be a beneficiary, but beneficiary cannot be a witness. And another reason, because you love your kids and you want to appoint a guardian. Now, for those out there with minor children below 21 years old, or you may be single parent, now making a will allows you to appoint this person called a guardian. Right? If something were to happen to you, you can ensure that this person will continue to look after your kids. Again, this is being responsible. Never assume that there will be people out there looking after your children. I've gone to court many times when nobody wanted to look after the children when the parent passed away. I've also gone to court many times when everybody wanted to look after the children. Both situations are bad. So why let this happen? When you can actually make a will and say that, well, I appoint so and so. Like in my will, I appointed my mom. So if I were to die this afternoon, my mom will come in and co-parent my 3 children with my wife. In my wife's will, she appointed my mother-in-law. This is all about forward planning, right? We ensure that there will be people who are willing to look after our 3 children should something happen to us. And also because you want to set up this thing called testamentary trust, right? If you have a will, you can do things like this. Like in my will, I do not give my children lump sum if I pass away. What I have done is that I have stated in my will that my children will only get my assets when they turn 18 years old, 25 and 30 years old. And they can only use the money for education, medical and living expenses. In other words, they cannot use my money for holidays, to go shopping and all these things. So what I've done is that I've set up testamentary trust in my will, right? And staggered my payments to them. Because they're still young, I do not believe in giving them lump sum, right? So with a will, you can do things like this. And lastly, because you want to avoid costly disputes, if you have no will, right, there is a chance that your family, your loved ones may actually quarrel, right, and may go to court. And as we speak, I have 5 live cases on hand that I'm handling. As part of what I do, I go to court, sue people and get sued all the time. Right? I see these disputes day in, day out. Right? Don't let these things happen. You are in a position to avoid all these problems. You should do it. Right? Don't leave it to chance. Now, what assets can you give under your will? Your will can include condominiums, HDB flats, landed properties in Singapore. If your real estate are located overseas, you have to do a separate will overseas. It is becoming very common for people to have multiple wills. One Singapore will, one Australian will, one Malaysian will. We can help you to coordinate, right? We work with law firms around the world, right? To help you achieve multiple wills. Right? But basically, your Singapore will cover your Singapore assets. And of course, your Singapore will can include monies in a bank account, stock and shares, sarong kebaya, Rolexes, so on and so forth. So your will can include many things. But there are a few things that your will cannot include. For example, monies in your CPF account. The balances in your CPF accounts like ordinary, retirement, Medisave account cannot be included in your will. When a person passes away in Singapore, all your CPF accounts will be closed automatically. The CPF balances in your CPF accounts will be transferred to the public trustee office located at Maxwell Road, Tanjong Pagar. What the public trustee would want to see is whether you have done a CPF nomination. Right? Please consult your financial consultant from FLA organization if you do not know what this nomination is all about. If you have done a CPF nomination, all your CPF balances will be remitted directly to your nominee's bank accounts or CPF account. If you have not done any CPF nomination, the CPF balances will be distributed under the Intestate Succession Act. In other words, CPF board will not care if you have done a will or not. Everything follows the CPF nomination regime. The other category of assets that cannot be included in your will is insurance with nomination. So if you have bought insurance policies and made nominations, your will not be able to include this insurance policy. Now, conversely, if you have insurance policies without any nominations made, your will be able to include this insurance policy, right? The other asset that cannot be included in your will is what we call joint ownership properties. Now, for example, if your HDB flat is jointly owned, husband and wife. Now, joint ownership, there are two types, joint tenancy or tenancy in common. If your HDB flat is owned as joint tenant, the right of survivorship will apply, meaning that if the husband were to pass away first, the husband loses all the interest in the HDB. The wife becomes the sole owner. Now, since the husband has lost the HDB, lost all interest in the HDB, even if the husband has a will, his will cannot include what he does not have. The HDB then falls under the wife's will. Now, conversely, if the wife were to pass away first, the wife loses all the interest in the HDB, right? The HDB belongs to the husband's will and falls under the husband's will. And now, to put it simply, whoever passes away first loses the HDB. So if you want the HDB flat to be included in your will, you have to outlive your spouse. Now, the other type of joint ownership is what we call tenants in common. Now, if you have bought the property as tenants in common, in equal share, it means 50-50. If in unequal share, it could be 80-20 or 99-1. So if that is the case, the right of survivorship will not come in when you pass away. So when you pass away, your respective share can be included in your will. And this right of survivorship applies to bank account, right? So your will can include monies in your toe account, monies in your pillowcase, in your Milo tin, right? But it cannot include monies in the joint accounts, because the moment you have passed away, if you pass away first, the monies in the joint account belongs to the surviving joint account holder. All right. Now, what happens if I pass away without a will? Now, under Singapore law, this is the Intestate Succession Act. If you were to pass away without a will, leaving only surviving spouse, no children, no parents, your spouse will get everything. The law doesn't care whether you still love your spouse or not. He or she will get everything. Now, if you pass it, so you see, spouse is always priority under Singapore law, followed by kids. Now, if you pass away without a will, leaving surviving spouse and children, your spouse will get half, your children will get the other half. As you can see, your spouse is always more important than your kids. Your spouse always get the largest share. And if you have no kids, your spouse will get 50, your parents will get 50. So as you can see, your parents rank number 3, right? Now, if you have spouse and children, your parents get nothing, even if they are alive. This I totally disagree. So if I don't have a will, my mother will get nothing. My wife will get half, who is richer than me, and my kids will get the other half. My poor mother will get nothing. So that's why I make a will. Now, if you pass away without a spouse, without children, and your parents have passed away, your brother and sister will get equal share, followed by your grandparents and uncle and auntie. Now, if you pass away in Singapore without next of kin and without a will, all your hard-earned money will go to the state, right? The state, the government, the state, right? Now, look at this formula. Not everybody of your choice is included, right? Your in-laws, right? Your charities, your church temple mosque, your godson, your cousin, right? A lot of people are actually not included. Number 2, the distribution proportions, they are fixed. What do you mean by spouse 50%, children 50%? What if you want to give your children more than your spouse? You can't. So this law is actually rigid. There is no flexibility, right? But if you have a will, your will can override this law totally. In your will, you can state, I give everything I have to charity. Nobody can stop you. That is how powerful your will is. And rightly so, because we're talking about your hard-earned money, not other people's money. You need to decide for yourself. So this is a very good slide, right? You can take a picture of this slide, with or without a will, the difference. So as you can see on the left-hand column, with a will, you can give access to whoever you wish. You can appoint guardian, you can set up trust funds, it is flexible, you can choose your executor, lower legal costs in probate, and the application has less than 6 months, in fact, less than 2 months. If you pass away without a will, you have to, all your estate will be distributed in accordance with the intestate law, which will not be what you want. You cannot appoint a guardian, you cannot set up trust funds, it's inflexible, open to dispute. Really, there is really no reason not to have a will. So this is a very good slide. In case you forget everything that I've said in the past 40 minutes, just remember this slide. All right. So secure your loved one's future, ladies and gentlemen. Please do not procrastinate until it is too late. There is really no reason to. Doing away is neither troublesome nor costly. It is one of the best ways to show that you love and care for your family. You have provided in many ways for them. Now it is the time to complete this process. Do not miss this vital step, ladies.